So I'm going to introduce our speaker. Our speaker today is the Venerable Samiddha. Venerable Samiddha was born in Medan, Indonesia in 2014. He studied Buddhism at the Fuyang Buddhist Institute in Taiwan. In 2015, he joined the monastic under the guidance of Venerable Ekayana in Malaysia. In 2018, he graduated from Fuyang Buddhist Institute as the best graduate of his class. After graduating, he actively preached and taught Buddhism in Indonesia and Malaysia. From 2019 to 2023, he came to Houston to pursue his academic studies in philosophy and religion. At the same time, he assists the Texas Buddhist Association in conducting various religious services and delivering Dharma talks. Now he is attending graduate school at the University of Washington in Seattle, conducting study and research in Buddhist studies. His expertise include early Buddhist manuscripts, the history of Indian Buddhism, meditation, philology, and philosophy. One of his mottos is to live your life wholly and entirely with all the bitterness and sweetness, for the next life is so mysterious.
Hey, thank you, Hunter, for the introduction. And good morning, y'all. Happy New Year. I hope y'all are healthy and happy. Does anybody have any New Year resolution? If I may suggest one, maybe to come to the temple every Sunday, starting for the first Sunday in 2025 until the end of 2025. All right, let me share my screen. And before we begin, as usual, let us join our palm together and recite the verse to pay homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Right. So today's topic is the Heart Sutra, the essence of wisdom. This is the third talk, meaning we have two previous talks before, and we are going to continue our sutra today. But I'd like to begin with a review from the previous talk. So we were left off at this sentence that says form is not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from form. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. And the same goes for sensation, concept, mental formation, and consciousness. So the framework for this sutra is circled around what we call the five aggregates or the five collections that make up sentient beings, or especially human as humans. So there are five: form, sensation, concept, mental formation, and consciousness, as you can see in blue. But then what we can do with these five aggregates is that they are not different from emptiness, and emptiness is not different from them. So what does it mean by this? It means interconnectedness and non-duality. So to understand these two sentences, we can understand it as without emptiness, form, of course, included the other four, making the total of five aggregates, cannot be obtained. And without five aggregates, emptiness cannot be realized. So it's not something that, like Western thinking, good and bad are two totally separate entities. And it's also not like the Eastern yin yang, whereas in a goodness there is one badness, and in the badness there's some goodness in it. But it is something like this, a gradation between good and bad, interconnectedness and non-duality. It's hard to visualize it, but I hope you get the idea that if we think about it, nirvana and our life, or liberation and samsara, are interconnectedness. We cannot obtain liberation without living in samsara in the first place. And also, we cannot speak of something evil if there is no good in the first place. So I hope you get the idea. And it works the other way around. We cannot speak of something good or pure if there is no evil or bad in the first place. So these two must exist in the first place in order for us to understand the one or the other. And then today we are going to continue on the core, but before we begin, um, Hunter, could you please read us the whole Heart Sutra first so that we can get the sense of the sutra again?
Okay. Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, when practicing deeply the perfection of wisdom, realized that the five aggregates are all empty. He overcame all sorrow and suffering. O Sariputra, form is not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from form. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. And the same goes for sensation, concept, mental formation, and consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. They are not originated, not extinguished, not defiled, not pure, not increasing, not decreasing. Therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, no concept, no mental formation, no consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no form, sound, smell, taste, touch object, mind object, no eye realm, and so on up until no realm of mind consciousness, no ignorance and no destruction of ignorance, and so on up to no old age and death, and no destruction of old age and death. There is no suffering, arising, extinction, path, no wisdom, and no attainment, because there is no attainment. Bodhisattvas, by relying on the perfection of wisdom, the heart is without worries. Because there is no worries, he has no fear, passed beyond error and illusion, and reached highest nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by relying on the perfection of wisdom, attained the complete perfect enlightenment. Thus know that the perfection of wisdom is the great divine mantra, the supreme mantra, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, which can relieve all suffering. It is true, not false. Thus, it is the perfection of wisdom mantra. The mantra goes as follows: Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhiswa.
All right, thank you. So what you all have just heard is the sutra that every Mahayana monastery recites during the morning or even evening chanting. So this is not something like unfamiliar to most of the Asian communities, Buddhist, but this is something that is really the practice of every Mahayana Buddhism, no matter whether it's Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and even Vietnamese. So most Buddhists from this community recite this sutra as a kind of practice, a kind of routine, and even a kind of use as a protection for them, even though the content of the sutra itself is fully philosophic and not just a simple thing to digest in the first place. So today we are going to continue on this part marked in the red box that says, O Sariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. They are not originated, not extinguished, not defiled, not pure, not increasing, not decreasing. Therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, no concept, no mental formation, and no consciousness. So the subject here is all dharmas, meaning the self and all the phenomena up there, literally everything you can think of in the world are marked by emptiness. So what are the characteristics of emptiness? It can be categorized into three categories. The first one is the ontology, the quality, and the quantity of all kind of things in the world, especially the emptiness. So what is emptiness? If we want to describe it, we use what we call the rhetoric of negation or the negative expression. We define emptiness, especially in the Heart Sutra. It defines emptiness by saying what emptiness is not. So it is not originated nor extinguished, ontologically speaking, if you ask about the origin of emptiness. And what's the quality of emptiness? It's not defiled nor pure. And the quantity is not one or many or zero. So what is emptiness? We can't really say it in affirmative what it is. We can only describe it by saying what it is not. So by saying it is not originated, not nor extinguished, what does it mean by this? Is it nothing or is it something? Well, actually, we can't say it's nothing. For example, nirvana. Is nirvana an existence? Yes. Is nirvana a non-existence? The answer is yes too. So what is it? By thinking this way, we transcend the worldly views, mainly the worldly view of duality. We often think the world as exist or non-exist, someone is good or bad, something is high or low, always in duality. You are handsome, you're not. You're a good guy, you're the bad guy. And sometimes even in between. You're not that good, but you're not that bad either. But still the framework is still two kind of things in between, not in between, which are all error actually. So the philosopher Nagarjuna says, breaking the duality without clinging to oneness. When we speak of non-duality, it doesn't mean that there is oneness, like the higher or supreme God out there that surpass all the duality. Non-duality is not necessarily one, right? Because it can also mean three or four or even zero. So the concept of non-duality is actually not to propose anything in positive, but to negate what we common people used to think of, which is in two kinds of mode. So in this regard, Buddhism takes the anti-realism position, as we can see in Samyutta Nikaya, Kaccana Gotta Sutta. It says something like this. This world mostly relies on the dual notions of existence and non-existence. But when you truly see the origin of the world with right understanding, the concept of non-existence regarding the world does not occur. And when you truly see the cessation of the world with right understanding, the concept of existence regarding the world doesn't occur. This is how right view is defined. All exist, this is one extreme. All does not exist, this is the second extreme. Avoiding these two extremes, the realized one teaches by the middle way. So you can see that the world is equivalent to what a person experiences, meaning that existence and non-existence are not objectively real. They are real if we have false understanding. We don't see the world as it really is, but when we have right view, we see the origin of the world. We know that the world exists. And when we see the cessation of the world with right understanding, we know that the world doesn't exist. So existence and non-existence are not objectively real in this sense. And then moving on this part, the sutra says no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no form, sound, smell, taste, touch, object, mind, object, no I realm, and so on up to no realm of mind consciousness. So we have three parts here to discuss. The first two parts are talking about what we call the 12 sense basis, internal and external basis. So the internal basis are the senses, our senses. In Buddhism, we know of six senses, in which the mind is the sixth, in addition to eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, and their respective objects. So we have form, especially color, sound, smell, taste, touch object, and mind object. The eye sees the form, especially color. The ear hears the sound. The nose will takes up or smells the smell. And then the tongue will taste the taste. The body will touches the touch object. And the mind will think about the mind object. So these all make a total of 12 sense bases. And the sutra says that the 12 sense bases are empty. The bases here, ayatana in Sanskrit, mean to nurture and to give rise. They are the essential foundations upon which all mental activities depend and from which they arise. So if we think about our life as a human, our life is simply just about our senses, isn't it? We live and depend upon our senses. We only know what we see, hear, taste, smell, touch, and even think. If you throw someone into a remote island with no connection to the external world, what this person would be pretty different from us, right? Because he or she has no connection to the external world. They only know of what they sensory experience is. So here, the arising of consciousness depends on the interaction between the senses and their corresponding objects. Both the senses and the objects are the products of conditions, thus are devoid of any independent essence. They're all empty. So what the sutra emphasizes in this context is the conditions or dependence. Senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and so on, cannot arise independently on its own. They can only arise if there are conditions for them to arise. What are the conditions for, let's say, the seeing? We need a good or healthy eyes in the first place, and then we need the object. We need something for us to see. And then there must be a consciousness called eye consciousness for us to have a vision. And it's if one of these changes, the whole experience, the whole consciousness changes too. So nothing is really independent in this case. But the problem is ordinary people mistake the functions of seeing forms, hearing sounds, and other sensory activities as proof of an inner enduring entity, or what we call soul or the self or Atman in Sanskrit. This is a fundamental error, thinking that there is independent self or there is the controller, the independent observer. If such a soul or self existed inherently and independently, it wouldn't require external conditions to perceive. But the fact we need forms, we need sounds, we need smells for our senses to work properly. And and one would be able to see forms or hear sounds at all times without the need for object or external stimuli if they exist independently, if there is soul or self. So this kind of thinking is what I coined the term as 1 + 1 = 2 formula. It captures all the essence or the definitions of Buddhist dependent origination, actually. So it means that without the 1 + 1 interaction, there's no 2. In order for something to arise, we need conditions. We need more than one condition at least. So we know, right? It's very common to say that the law of cause and effect, it's pretty popular that if you experience something, it must have a cause. But the right way to think of this is that it's not only have one cause, but many causes for it to happen. So the eye, for example, in our sensory experience, the eye isn't always seeing on its own. One alone doesn't have any meaning. The form or the color or the object of seeing isn't inherently seen at all time. It needs the eye to see. And then the eye consciousness only arises when the two come together, meaning the eye has a contact with the form, with the object of seeing, right? So the error lies in the people thinking there's a two, or namely the eye consciousness that exists by itself, and enduring self that stands apart from conditions. So if you think about a kind of, if I give you a visual metaphor about the door and the key, the sense faculty is the door, the sense object is the key, and the consciousness is the experience of the door opening. So without the key or the object, the door stays closed, right? And without the door, the key has nothing to open. So if we have only one key, there's no meaning of a key without the door for it to open. And also, we have a simile of the phone and the call. Think of your senses like a phone, and the phone itself doesn't create a call, right? It needs a signal from another phone to connect and make a call happen. So the phone is like the sense faculty, the signal is like the sense object, and the call is consciousness. No signal, no call. This shows that consciousness is not a static self, but a dependent arising event. And if we think about our New Year resolution too, if we only have resolutions without actions, there will be no results. Again, it applies the same to every single aspect in life. Us alone or self alone will not have any purpose in the world without them, without the other people, right? We are working, even though it seems like we are working for ourselves alone, but it actually not. I mean, if we think about the purpose of life, what's your take? To serve your family, to serve yourselves. Even when you say that you only serve your own selves, your entity is not single, it's not one single entity. Even though it sounds like you say, okay, I just want to live on my own. But if you think of it deeply, at one time you have to feed your stomach, you have to eat. That's one part of your life. But then on the other part, you have to feed your mind. You need something to trigger your mind for you to stay alive. So you need entertainment, you need a book for you to read, and even you need some dharma, some advices in life for you to stay strong in life, stay patient, and keep you happy. So we see there are many aspects in life and not just one. And then also, if we think that one can stand alone, without needing any addition or reduction. Actually, it's not, because if we take emptiness as a number 0, then even the 1 here is the product of 1 plus 0. Therefore, if you think it mathematically, the Heart Sutra is pretty mathematic, because 1 itself is the product of 1 plus 0. It needs another at least 2 conditions for it to exist. So therefore, Heart Sutra says all conditions or all phenomena are marked by emptiness, because any single number that we know of can be added by a 0 or the emptiness. So everything is marked by 0. It's not false. And then if you think of it the other way around, if consciousness arises only from conditions, what happens when those conditions change? Well, the answer is the consciousness disappears. So if there really were an independent self doing the seeing, why would it stop when you close your eyes or turn your head? Because the conditions are absent and the consciousness changes too. And then the next content is the 18 elements composed of internal and external worlds. It only adds the consciousness part on the right here, making the total of 18. So we have the eye sense with the correspondence object, namely form or color, resulting in eye consciousness, that we know we are seeing something. We need the consciousness to arise. Otherwise, we'll just experience like the empty vision. You're looking at something, but your mind is thinking something else. So you're not really seeing, because what is active at that moment is only the mind consciousness. There's no eye consciousness. So the sutra says 18 elements are empty. Because of these distinct characteristics, namely 18 elements, consciousness is neither an inherent part of the subject nor the object, but arises dependently from their interaction. So the Heart Sutra doesn't take a position of reductionist that says the experience itself can be reduced to either the senses or the external objects or merely the consciousness itself or the mind itself. No, they all have to come together for them to work properly. Remember the formula 1 plus 1 equals 2? We need that. So the activities of sentient beings are composed of 3 types of phenomena. First is physical phenomena. We have our external worlds, forms, sounds, and other external objects. The second one is our internal experience, biological phenomena. We need to have eye, ear, and other senses. And then the mental phenomena, such as the awareness that arises through the senses. This mental phenomena is often mistakenly seen as our self or the soul. Usually we say something like the mind-body connection, in which the mind is emphasized. If one searches for the true essence of any of this, cannot be found. Since none of the 18 elements has an independent, intrinsic nature, they are ultimately empty and tranquil by nature. This is the meaning of complete emptiness and stillness. So if you remember the teaching in the Diamond Sutra, we know that by emptiness, we mean they are empty or lack of inherent nature. They have no real essence, even though they exist. So we have a little bit of mind game here. We are moving on to the philosophical views, especially Western one, about the question of what is real. So we're just gonna briefly survey some of the thoughts here. The first one, according to idealism, what is real? The answer is only minds exist. The external world is mind dependent. What we perceive as real is real. What we are not, it's not. And then we have a more extreme stand is solipsism. Only my mind exists. The external world is a projection. So it takes idealism further into emphasizing that only my mind exists, that the other people around me that exist is just my mental projection. They're not real. Only I is real. And then we have materialism. We know that Buddhism will totally reject this one. Only the external world exists and minds are a result of physical processes or brain activity. And then we have phenomenology, saying that consciousness is always directed toward objects shaping the perceived reality, so that the consciousness is always conscious of something. And our understanding of the world is based on what our experience are. And then we have empiricism. The minds are shaped by the sensory experience of the external objects, so it relies heavily on the sensory experience, or in what we've just seen, relies on the 12 sense basis. And then realism here is external objects exist independently of the mind. There is a real world out there that exists whether or not we perceive it. So if I give you one scenario that I believe I've talked about this years ago during my talk, if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one to hear it, does it make a sound? And your answer will usually fall within one of these view, right? If you believe that the sound still exists, even though there's no ear to hear it, then you fall into the realism, right? There is a word out there, or even materialism. And if you say that there's no sound because there's no ear to hear it, then you fall into phenomenology or even empiricism, right? So if you've ever watched these movies, then great. This is the Matrix. So what do you think the Matrix fall into which views of the philosophical views I've just shown? Okay, you can just keep your answer for yourself. And then the second movie is Inception. It's about the dream stealing, stealing into someone else's dreams. What do you think? What is real in this movie, or what the director wants us to believe? And then the third movie is The Truman Show. Ooh. Does anybody know all of these three movies? I believe so. Yeah, it's a classic. Okay, so my verdict on the films is that The Matrix fall into idealism, meaning that the word what is real is mental construct, that what my mind perceives as real is real. And then Inception falls into phenomenology and idealism because the dream worlds are mind-dependent realities. This is idealism, mind construct. And then what is real for one person might be unreal for another. This is phenomenology, emphasizing on the phenomena, our experience, our consciousness experience. And then the Truman Show is a bit complicated. It falls into empiricism, realism, and phenomenology. So if you've watched the movie, Truman discovers the truth through observation and evidence. He notices anomalies in his environment. So this is empiricism, right? He is aware of the sensory experiences. And then Truman escapes the illusion to find an external world that exists independently of his perception. This is realism. And then Truman's perception is limited by the world constructed for him. This is the phenomenology. All right. So what is the Heart Sutra position? Idealism, only mind exists, totally rejected because even the mind is conditioned. Solipsism, only my mind exists. This is also rejected because of the same reason. Materialism, rejected, mind is not reducible to material processes. Phenomenology is the closest one. But then the Heart Sutra goes further by emphasizing that the consciousness itself is emptiness. They lack of inherent nature. They cannot arise by its own. And then empiricism, partially, because Buddhism and Heart Sutra values direct experience but denies as an independent observer. Realism, partially, because the objects exist but lack inherent existence. Like the scenario of a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, right? While the Heart Sutra doesn't deny the existence of external world, but it emphasizes on it needs our senses for the experience, for the sound to be heard, for it to exist. Okay, so the takeaways for today's talk is that emptiness is explained by the rhetoric of negation. There are 6 in total. And then the Heart Sutra follows a unique middle path. This is the position of Heart Sutra or Buddhism in general. The first one is emptiness. Everything is lack of inherent nature. And then the second one is dependence. All phenomena are conditioned, 1 + 1 = 2 formula. And then there's non-self, which is the very basic and core teaching in Buddhism. There is no controller. We are all connected with, conditioned by, and dependent on each other. So if I ask you what is real in Buddhism or in the Heart Sutra especially, we don't want to simply just say, oh, nothing exists at all, because in reality, everything exists if we perceive it, if there is condition, and nothing exists if the conditions are not there. And more about the dependent origination on the next talk. But for now, I think this is enough. And before I close the session, this is my favorite quote of the day. Any definition of a successful life must include service to others. We emphasize on the interconnectedness and non-self by putting others first before ourselves by President Bush 41. All right, I guess that's enough for today. Let us do the transfer of merit. Join your palms together. May my merit leads to the destruction of the pollutant. May my merit be a condition for gaining nirvana. I share my portion of merits with all beings. May all of them share my portion of merits equally. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions for the Venerable regarding his talk on Zoom in the temple?
Not a question, just a comment that I really, really enjoy these talks. There's so much in them. I love the way you manage to explain things, but I still need to go away and dig into it a lot more. Maybe watch the video another dozen times when it's posted. But there's so much in there and you explain it so well. I really, really appreciate these talks. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sharanya?
Thank you, Bhante. I want to second what Dirk said. You explained this so beautifully. I would not be able to even decipher it, figure it out by myself. But I had a question. As I was hearing you talk about emptiness, I understand that it can be described, that maybe it could be pointed to in terms of negation. But as I heard you talk, a question came to my mind, which I'm not sure makes a lot of sense. And the question was, then how is emptiness experienced?
Yeah. How is emptiness be experienced?
Yeah.
Yeah. So emptiness is something that can't be experienced. It has to be realized. It is the kind of, it's always there. We don't need to like using our eye to see something in order to have a vision. It's not that something to be seen. It's not that some phenomena to be thought of. It's just there. When the so it is a kind of understanding, a kind of right view that everything is conditioned, everything is lack of inherent nature. So as long as we understand this kind of thinking, I think we are into the preliminary steps of realizing emptiness.
So it is something that is to be known. And can it be approached logically by saying this, like maybe constantly reminding ourselves, saying this is dependent on that, that's dependent. So is it something that we can work on by thinking about it?
Yes, as you said. So if this is depending on that, it is the emptiness already, actually. So when something is dependent on something else, we can say that the thing itself is empty because it cannot exist by its own independently, right? Every single thing in this world exists dependent on another thing, thus their emptiness. So this is how the Heart Sutra or Nagarjuna defines the emptiness. Yeah, we have one question from Harry. Uh, can you please say a little more to explain this phrase?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you need to unmute, Harry.
yeah. Emptiness is form and form is emptiness. Yeah, so as in my slide that I showed you all, that these two things, form and emptiness, is a big word. But if we understand it as like the good and evil, a liberation and samsara, we know that liberation is not something outside of samsara. It's not something outside of our life. We need to have a samsara. We need to live in samsara for us to have the purpose of liberation, right? And also, if about good and evil, we can only think of doing something good if evil exists in the first place. So the goodness, the God, they don't exist independently apart from evil, you know? So the duality here is interconnected, and we are not trying to say that the one is better than the other. Rather, they have the same value, the same position, and our job here is to transcend the good and the bad, the emptiness and the form. We don't want to cling to any each of these. This is what it means in this phrase. Yeah, it
Thank
takes
you.
time to digest. I myself have difficulty on that. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions from, oh, we got
I
one.
have one question. So I remember on one of the slides, there are, I guess, 3 stages: ear, hearing, and the hearing sensation. I guess like on the third row, each sensation, what's the difference between that one and the mind?
Okay, I see. I see. So we have senses, we have objects, and we have consciousness. Is that what you're asking? What's the difference between the senses and the consciousness?
Yeah.
Okay, let me,
If you have that slide, I think I can
yes.
explain.
So you're talking about this mind, this one?
Yes, that one.
Right.
Yeah, so on the third column, what's the difference between like all those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, what's it that difference consciousness between like the mind object? Because to
Right.
me, mind object is also consciousness.
Okay. Okay, good
I don't
question.
know if I understand my question. It's just
Yeah, I got you. So mine here in this column, it has 2 functions. The first function is to pick up whatever picked up by the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. So if you want to be specific, every single consciousness that happen in each sense must have the mind consciousness in it. Okay, so when we see something, we are not only having the eye consciousness, but we also have the eye plus mind consciousness, ear plus mind consciousness. And if the sixth sense itself, the object is dharma, meaning something else apart from the form, sound, smell, taste, touch object. When we imagine something on our mind, this is the mind object and mind consciousness. So it has 2 functions. The first one is to pick, to follow whatever this each sense experience. And the second one, it has its own objects, meaning our thoughts, our imaginations, and so on and so forth, that only happen in our mind. So for example, the eye consciousness, the function of eye is only to recognize color or form. For example, if you're looking at the screen, our eye consciousness only know it as this color and this shape. That's it. But then why do we have perception like, oh, I like this screen, I don't like this screen? It is the work of mind consciousness here. So it gives the perception, the feeling, and the concept on whatever we see, hear, smell, taste, and everything. So for example, if we eat something that is hard, our taste, our tongue can only know the taste, whether it's salty, whether it's sweet or sour, that's it. But when we eat it's too sour, I don't like it, this is the work of the mind consciousness in it. That's why I say for every single consciousness, it must be accompanied by the mind consciousness. I hope that answers your question.
yeah, that was very
Yeah.
good explained.
I have a question. This is Liwen. Hi.
Sure.
Hi. Thank you, Venerable, for this talk. It's very profound and a lot to think about. Actually, every time you bring out about the sound in the forest, if it is not heard by anyone, is it considered reality? I always want to ask what is your answer to that?
Well, okay, you're asking my position. Good
Yes.
question. Well, if you're a philosopher, you know we don't propose an answer. We tend to only asking a question. But if you're asking my take as a Buddhist teacher, I'll say from the perspective of Buddhism, which is phenomenology, that there's no sound if there's no ear to hear it. Because whatever way you try to prove it, you still need your ear consciousness to prove it. Even if you put a recorder in there and then you bring it back to hear it, oh, there's a sound. Well, you have to hear the recorder in the first place for you to prove that there is sound. Otherwise, does it really matter if right now at this moment there's a tree in the forest that we don't know fall off? Can you hear the sound? Well, so it all comes back to us in life. I don't know what your guys' take on this one. Harry?
I was hoping you'd ask very briefly if you defined sound as the vibration of molecules, then that sound would exist even if there are no ears to hear it. So in that sense, and it's similar to asking about the sun and our solar system. It doesn't seem like you want to argue that the sun and our solar system came into existence only when intelligent life arose on Earth to be able to perceive it. Arguably, the sun and the solar system existed before there was any intelligent life on Earth to perceive it. So let me just say, at least hypothetically, you can argue that the sound of that tree falling in the forest exists even if there are no people or ears to hear it, dependent in that instance on the way you define sound.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's always like that, the problem of definition in the first place before you answer something. Right. Good. Thank you. Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I think after thinking about it, I think I might know what this answer is, though. But originally, I thought formations were the 28 rupas. Then I kind of thought maybe Sita Sikas, like mental formations, Sita Sika. But then I thought, well, maybe they're formations for the eye formations. But when you say formations are empty, you're really talking about the 28 rupas. Is that correct?
Okay, so in this Heart Sutra, we are talking about all of them, including all the Sita, Cetasika, Rupa, and Nibbana. All are empty.
Okay.
All of them, all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Nagarjuna's second turning of the wheel, I guess. That sounds familiar, I guess.
It's not negation, it's negation of the clinging to what you perceive as real.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question. So one of the things that we went through when we went through the Diamond Sutra, this idea that there's no inherent like nature to like an object, there's no self, nothing has like an independent self. And one of the ideas behind this is you can't have change if something has this self, has a set defined quality that is unable to change. If emptiness, even if it's being defined through all this negation, is sort of this underlying value, does that mean that emptiness has an inherent self that's unchanging? Because it would seem that if that's the case, nothing would be able to change from emptiness.
Yeah. So there are two schools about this. The one school will propose that the emptiness itself is permanent, but in the Heart Sutra, it is proposing that the emptiness itself is changing. Because like what Harry asked in the chat, the phrase emptiness is form and form is emptiness. It speaks all. That's a real deal right there in that one phrase, that the emptiness itself is not permanent because it relies on whatever it negates, right? So when it negates form, whatever form or however form is negated, That's how the emptiness works. And when it negates the consciousness, whatever or however the consciousness is negated, that's how the emptiness is working. So it's not like there's a fixed state of emptiness that negates everything with its own power, but it's all related. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you
meeting.
very much. Thank you very much, Samiddha.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
very much.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Bante.